Don Gilbert. I'm a vice president of the Jewish Federation of Sacramento. Is sort of the umbrella organization, the central address, if you will, for the Jewish community, and we provide a lot of social services.
Yasar Dabur. I'm the chairman for the Arab American Caucus and executive board member of the California Democratic Party. I'm also the chair of Palestine American League. It's a local organization. We created it to advocate for awareness of the Palestinian issue.
My name is Shahar, or Shachar in the Hebrew pronunciation. Jewish Voice for Peace, or JVP, is a US-based grassroots organization led by Jews to bring justice to Palestine.
My father was born in 1929. When Israel was created, he was 19 years old. He was born and raised in San Francisco, even then a liberal city. He told me all about the anti-Semitism he faced. And he said when Israel was established, the world started looking at Jews a little differently. And he felt safer, even in this country. Hasn't the Jewish community lived through the millennium in a manner that suggests that the Jewish community should have freedom? The Jews are entitled to self-determination. Whether every Jew moves to Israel or not, we're entitled to have a country just like everyone else. And there's like 22 Arab countries. There can be one little Jewish country.
I'm a Palestinian refugee. My parents, my father in particular, in his second birthday on April 21st, 1948, his family carried him and had to cross the borders fearing for their life because of the Zionist gangs who were committing massacres, killing people and committing atrocities against the Palestinian. From Palestine, they went up north to Lebanon, all the way to Syria, where they settled in refugee camp. And that's where my parents met, and I was born in Syria in a refugee camp. I was born discontent with the surrounding, and the reason was all these stories that we heard about what we had in Palestine and the theft that was committed against us, stealing our homeland, stealing our houses.
As an Israeli that was born and raised in Israel, who most of my family is Israeli Jewish, I care about their safety, and I care about the safety of Palestinians, but the safety of my family and friends, my Israeli Jewish family and friends, is secured, it's guaranteed, right? It's enshrined in the laws of the state of Israel. While there are systems in place, violent systems in place that dispossess Palestinians, that oppress Palestinians, and as a Jewish person with Jewish values, and as someone that is from that place, I want to see that violence end.
We were expelled. The Jewish people were expelled. Israel is made up of Jews who were kicked out of, banished from, after centuries and centuries, Iraq, Iran, Yemen, Morocco, Tunisia, Syria, Turkey, and on and on. Those are indigenous communities to the Middle East and to Israel.
The British government issued the Balfour Declaration, promising the Zionists to construct a Jewish national homeland for them on Palestine. Really, in its essence, that was anti-Semitic because the European wanted to get rid of the Jews of Europe. So when the Zionists, they had a in their program, they were calling for a national homeland in Palestine. Europeans were happy to oblige and to send them off to Palestine to get rid of them. But at whose expense? Instead of actually bringing them justice in Europe, they brought them to replace the indigenous people of Palestine.
So some Jews are indeed indigenous to the land and have lived there for generations, but majority of the Jewish Israeli inhabitants came there a bit prior to the formation of the State of Israel and after, right? They came in as settlers. Palestinians have lived there for generations, right? Generations over generations, until they were expelled, until their houses were taken, until their villages were destroyed. So we need to acknowledge that Palestinians are indigenous to the land. Palestinians that are Muslim, that are Christian, right? and that are Jewish.
Today, we find most of us in exile, whereas those Palestinians who remained behind, they live under suppression, oppression.
I think Palestinians, many have, just like Jews, complex identities, especially if they live in Israel, you know, and for sure, just like literally every country in the world, for sure, Palestinian civilians, citizens of the state of Israel, you know, suffer discrimination, just like, and it doesn't make Israel unusual or unique. They don't suffer oppression, they suffer discrimination. But they also are part of the Knesset, which is our parliament, Israel's parliament, not my parliament. They're doctors, they're lawyers.
I don't see this as a conflict. There is the state of Israel that has one of the most state-of-the-art militaries in the world, right? Bombing Gazans, blockading the Strip, militarily occupying the West Bank in what many human rights organizations called an apartheid state, where there's two sets of rules for different people.
Gaza is an open-air prison. For the past 17 years, since Hamas assumed power and won the election, they put Gaza, it's surrounded by Israel. Not a thing that passes through to Gaza is without Israeli permission.
So Israel's not occupying Gaza at all. The Gazans can pick whatever leaders they want. They've picked a theocratic terrorist organization as their leaders. They're entitled to. There's consequences to that selection. But they had an opportunity to build, this is what happened before Israel was born. The Jews built infrastructure. They built the infrastructure of a future state. They invested in healthcare and education and roads and government institutions. The Palestinians invested in terrorism in Gaza. That's what they invested in. If they had built, you know, those things that I just described, if they had built government institutions, healthcare facilities, schools, and invested in human capital and all that, they would have a Palestinian state right now.
The problem is occupation. What Hamas did and other resistant movement, that was in behalf of the Palestinian people. And internationally, that is justified resistance against the occupier.
Israel is not responsible for the civilian casualties in Gaza. That Hamas, which is such a cynical entity that it's hard for Americans to appreciate how cynical it is, that Hamas is responsible for those deaths by putting Israel in a position that you either continue to accept rockets being shot on your civilians, or you take out those rocket launchers and the collateral damage of our civilian deaths will be on you, according to the world's views, and not on us.
Growing up in Israel, you are taught a certain story. You are taught that, first of all, Palestinians are a threat to you. We learn about them as terrorists, as primitive. They are called, literally we're taught that, a demographic problem. Their existence as human beings is a problem. So unlearning that, right? Unlearning that, seeing Palestinians as full human beings, that completely changed my life. I would say this to Americans. Americans, we are funding this. So I think we need to know about it. We are giving Israel millions of dollars in military aid.
I don't even understand why anyone would even question the United States relationship with Israel. What is a country in the Middle East that is more akin to the United States in values than Israel? There is no other country that's even a close second.
We pay them $3.8 billion annually. And what makes it much worse for us Palestinian Americans, that we are made complicit in killing our own people with our own money. That's what makes it harder. That's why I am active and I'm fighting, because I don't want to pay out of my pocket for the bullets that kill my brothers and sisters in Palestine.
What I want, what I hope, is that there will be a solution that Palestinian wants, that will end the human rights violations, that will end the violence that they're experiencing, a solution that will bring peace and security to Palestinians and everyone else, including my family and friends.
Any resolution should include the return of all the Palestinian refugees to their homelands and to compensate them for the suffering over the years of occupation, for those who remained in Palestine and for those who lived in exile, and to compensate them for their properties and land, in addition to their right of return, and to punish those who were responsible. We paid horrible prices because of the Israeli occupation. So I feel when another civilian loses his life, it doesn't matter on what side.
It's our homeland. It's not like a debate, you know? And then Palestinian people, I'm not going to tell them what they say is their homeland. They say the same spot is their homeland. That's their decision, not mine. So we both have these claims. Let's compromise. Let's each have a homeland there. I don't want to win a war. I don't want Israel to win a war against the Palestinians. I don't want the Palestinians to win a war against Israel. I want both parties to the political dynamic to be that both parties want to sit down, represent their people, get a peace agreement that's not perfect for either party. That's the only solution to this. On both sides of the conflict, people's lives are affected negatively, whether they're Israelis or Palestinians. You know, people are harmed or die or live under challenging circumstances. Should the Palestinians have freedom? Yes. Should the Jews have freedom? Yes. We should all have freedom. How we get there and how we manage our freedom is the issue.